My name's Jeb. I'm going to show you how to treat powdery mildew in the garden. This is powdery mildew on a zucchini plant. And if you garden in summer, you'll need to know how to take care of this issue. And the first thing to do is understand how to identify it. So like with all fungal infections, you're going to look for the circular pattern. And you can see this is a collection of little circles. And it's powdery mildew because it's got this powdery look to it. And once you see it on top of the leaves, you're going to look under the leaves, and there's going to be a mildew bonanza down there. You can see some of it right there. And we will want to treat this by pruning off the affected leaves and then spraying the plant. Here's the common causes for it. Mainly it's humidity, and also it's your plant being vulnerable. And most often it affects cucurbits, which are zucchini, squash, cucumbers, pumpkins, pretty much anything that has these large, broad leaves. And the main reason they get infected is because it's humid and the spores are blowing around in the air. Also, if your leaves get wet, so people say, oh, water down here, right? Don't splash the leaves. But what happens is dew and moisture from the plant collects in these leaves. So at night when it's cooler, you'll get this water pooling on the leaves. So even if your leaves are being kept dry, you're probably going to run into the problem. It can spread from nearby plants, blow it in the wind. Also, garden pests can spread it, and there's not too much you can do about a leaf hopper here or there. But if you have a plant with an infestation of bugs and it has powdery mildew, those bugs could spread it through the garden. So to treat this, we're going to prune off all the affected leaves. And you could probably compost them. This stuff's not going to live long in the hot compost bin. And it's everywhere anyway, in the soil, in the air. And so we're going to prune. You can see here's some previous pruning that occurred right here. So we're going to prune off all the affected leaves. And do your best not to, not to spread these suckers around the garden, but don't kid yourself. When you're cutting these leaves, spores are going to fly everywhere. So that's why after we finish pruning, let's see, that one's pretty gnarly. After we finish pruning, we're going to spray the plant. And there's two main kinds of sprays you can use. There's a systemic spray, and you might see those at the garden store. And those actually, the spray enters the plant, gets in the sap, and then fights off the mildew, or that's the theory. And I tried that once. The reality is they are expensive, and as with any spray, you're going to have to repeatedly spray. They're also pretty toxic. Even if you're not concerned about being organic, which I try to be when possible, they, you got to get all your protective gear on and lock the dogs out, lock the kids out, spray them, let them dry, and then probably going to come back again. It's like $7 a bottle. So another type of spray you can use is a topical spray, which basically you spray under the leaves and on the leaves, and it kills the spores or helps prevent them from spreading. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use baking soda, neem oil, and a little soap just to make it stick. Now here's something interesting, right? So with the zucchini plants, we're pruning in here, and you can see this leaf. That one's got to go, but see how it's leaned under the plant here? Look. And so if we cut that at the base to make it nice and clean, the plant is going to probably fall over. So I'm actually going to cut this one here, and we leave some of these to help support the plant. If you trim them all nice and clean, you know, it'll be nice and pretty, but the plant can fall over, and that could damage your roots, and then also you'll have more leaves on the ground and more powdery mildew. Like I said, my preferred solution is baking soda, neem oil, and soap. For every quart I use half a teaspoon of soap, because my soap is kind of strong. I use half a teaspoon of neem oil and a teaspoon of baking soda, and I dialed back the neem oil just because it's more expensive, and I'm not really focused on killing bugs here. I'm just working on the antifungal, which mostly the baking soda will do. And let's finish pruning this up. And some of the other topical sprays I know people use is milk. I haven't used that. I've heard that's pretty effective. Diluted 10:1. Also, some people use sulfur. There's some other things you can see in the garden store. The baking soda and soap, you know, you need to come back and check the plant periodically, but it's pretty cheap. It works pretty well. I'm going to finish pruning this, and then we'll give it a spray. One of the important ways you can help prevent the spread of powdery mildew is have good airflow in your plants. And here's one example. This might be overkill, right? You can see the space around this zucchini plant. And of course it's next to the lawn, which can bring in humidity, but you know, you put the plants where you have room. And you can see there's good amount of space in here. You can see some of the trimming from where it's been treated before. Now, one of the other things, this plant has lots of room, so I'm going to let the side shoots grow. But if we look in here, zucchini has side shoots too, and you'll see in here, right? Here's a side shoot. Right here. I'm going to let that grow as long as the powdery mildew doesn't get too troublesome. But if I had to, I could just remove the side shoots and just have the main growing stem, and then there'd be less. Right, there'd be more airflow, less bulk in here. But so far it's looking pretty good. Here's all the material I removed. And here's my sprayer. We're ready to spray. This has this nozzle, right, with the adjustable tip, so you can point it under the leaves well. But really, if you want to really get under the leaves, right, you're going to have to pick them up with one hand and spray with the other. That's why it's nice to use an organic spray. You don't have to put on gloves and goggles and all that. And you need to spray all the undersides, including the stems, and then the tops. Don't spray in the heat of the day. You know, wait till right before nighttime maybe. You don't want to spray and then have a hot day. And you can see in here, here are some stems that I've left. The stems to these leaves, I've left them long to help support the plant, right, so it doesn't fall over, because when you're cutting these leaves off, you shift kind of the weight, and you don't want your plant to flop over. Now, before I spray, let's look at the finished plant. It still's got plenty of leaves, and it'll recover. It'll be happy without the infected leaves on them. Probably have to come back several times and continue spraying. So how to prevent it? Well, keep the leaves dry. So obviously don't get the leaves wet when you're watering, but like I said, it's that humidity. You know, have good airflow under your plants to help dry them off. You can do preventative spraying. Here's the dogs coming to check on what I'm up to. Preventative spraying, I just wait till I see it. I inspect the plants regularly so that you know when it's coming. And you want to remove vectors from the garden that can spread it. You can see there's a leafhopper going around spreading the mildew. I can't do much about that. The neem oil, you know, So mainly just removing the material and spraying is what I rely on, and it works pretty well. And of course the main thing with powdery mildew to keep in mind is you cannot fully prevent it. It will come, especially to these vulnerable plants like this zucchini. And you just do your best to control it, and you know, battle with it through the summer. Don't get upset when it comes back. Pretty much every 3 days you got to come back and see if there's any new infection. And you may not have to spray that often. You don't want to spray too much and damage your leaves, but you know, you learn to spray pretty quick, and it's not you just trim it, spray it. It's not that big a deal. Thanks for watching.